So before we get into this video, one of the things I want to say is I hope all of you will take a second to go out and pray for these people in California that are absolutely being decimated by these incredibly terrible fires down there. This is something that we see every year, but this is a particularly bad year, and so many of my YouTube channel friends and also people that are friends of mine that also have YouTube channels themselves are just being decimated by these fires. I have so many friends that are in the farming business or in the orchard business, in the almond business, in the wine business, that are just terrified right now that these fires are going to destroy their way of life. Please take a minute to pray about this and ask that these people get a break of some kind. It's just really been horrible. They need a break, and I hope that you'll take the time to do that, because I really believe that prayer does help and does work. So take a minute and do that, and we'll talk about our video in just a second here, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that before we got too far into this. Thank you so much. And if you want to send out any kind of message to people that may follow me on my channel here, or other YouTube people that are trying to get through this horrible time down in California, just leave a message below. I'll make sure that they get it. I know that they're paying attention to my channel, and they will get that message. It's so important. And again, thank you and God bless you. Hey everyone, George here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that I don't think that we talk about enough. How often do you think about the kinds of food that you're feeding your fish, what those foods are doing for your fish or doing to your fish, and how much nutrition are you giving them? Are you giving them a wide variety of foods? Are you giving them just the same basic foods every day? There's so much that goes into this, and there's so much that needs to be talked about. Today we're going to get into it, and we're going to talk about pellets, frozen foods, flake foods, live foods. We're going to hit it all, and we're going to make sure that by the time we're done here, everyone has a really good understanding of what it takes to keep fish healthy and happy, and we're going to do that right now. So as I said in my opening statement, there are such a variety of foods out there that it can be almost a daunting task to understand what foods are best suited for your fish, how much nutrition each one of these foods gives to your fish, and are they getting a variety of foods that's going to keep them happy and healthy over a long period of time, extending their life, making them more beautiful in the tank. There's so much that goes into the food thing that we really don't talk about it enough. And one of the things that I want to talk about here is people who are just generally giving their fish a variety of flake foods that really have the least amount of nutrition of all. And that is something I think is so important. They find that their fish are getting weak. They're finding that they're not colorful. They're finding that they're lethargic in the tank. All of this can be, if you're doing all the other things right, this can come right down to what kind of nutrition are my fish getting. Now, one of the things I want to talk about first, because I don't want to leave this out here for too long, and that is frozen foods. Now, if you look at this particular variety of foods, this is Daphne, and this is made by a company that I'm not going to advertise, but you can see the name right here. And Daphne is an important food because it comes in several different ways. Number one, the easy way to buy it is just get it in a frozen pack just like this here, and this saves you a lot of time on just getting a little bit of a square out of this. Each one of these comes in these individual squares. You don't have to use it all. You can break it up, put a small amount of it in a bowl with some water, and sort of let it sit for a little while and feed them that way. But this is a very, very important source of food for a fish's diet because it offers up so many nutritional things. It comes closest to being a live food. Now, I don't have live Daphne on hand here, but if you can feed Daphne in a live form, it's probably the best thing that you can possibly do. Now, Daphne is something that you can get from most fish stores. If you're shopping even at your big box stores such as Petco or PetSmart, all of these guys are going to carry some variety of Daphne, bloodworms, or any of the frozen foods that fall into the category of live foods that have been mixed up and made into frozen cubes just like this here. And it's so important that we give our fish a variety of foods, and this one here I wanted to talk about first because it's so important that we don't leave this out of our fish's diet. A lot of people do, and their fish don't have much color, their fish act lethargic, and their fish don't frankly live very long. So adding this to your diet can make all the difference in the world on how long your fish live, how colorful they are, and what you're doing for them nutrition-wise. It can mean everything. The next thing we're going to talk about is pellets here, and we're going to get to that in just a second. You know, the everyday beauty of our fish can have a lot to do with the kind of nutrition that they're getting, and it's so important that we give them a variety of diet. A lot of people just give them flake foods of one sort or another, and they leave it at that, and they just find that over time their fish are not as colorful, they're not as active, and they just don't live as long. One of the things that I've found is that the beauty of fish and the ability to keep your fish healthy comes down a lot to not just water quality, not just the environment, not just the nutrients in the water, but what kinds of foods you're putting in their bodies. We're going to get into that a lot, and we're going to talk about the different kinds of foods and the wide variety that I think you should be feeding your fish. If you're just an enthusiast that is not really 100% into this hobby, then I do understand why you may have a budget and you may have certain ideas about the kinds of foods that you're feeding. If you're someone who is a long-term hobbyist and you want to keep your fish in the best condition that you can, then all of these foods right here and many others that I'm going to show you today are going to be essential in keeping those fish healthy over the long term. If you've been in the hobby for a while, then you understand what I'm saying, and you understand that the importance of feeding your fish a variety of foods is something that they would normally get in their wild environment, and you can replicate that by finding foods on the market. There's an endless variety of foods for every single kind of fish out there, and there is absolutely no reason to not be able to feed that variety of foods to those fish to keep them healthy. Now, there are pellets, there are flakes, there are different kinds of foods out there other than frozen food and live foods, which I think are very essential as well in keeping our fish healthy. And I think that if you look at some of these, you can see what they say on there and what they actually do. I can tell you that some of these are very good, and others are just a advertisement nightmare because they really don't offer up what they say they're going to. For example, this one here by Tetramin offers like 4 or 5 different varieties of food in one canister, and I can tell you that most of these foods are exactly the same except for maybe the shrimp that's in there. One of the better foods that you wouldn't think is one of the better foods because it's not very expensive are these 2 foods right here. This one's a breeder food. It's by a company called Sira, and this has probiotics in it. It has all kinds of things that are going to give your fish everything that's essential to keep them healthy. And it is slow sinking food, which is another thing that we're going to talk about a little bit more, hopefully later, if I don't forget. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, because it does mean that the food does not sit on the top of the water, but it slowly drifts down, giving your fish an opportunity to get that food. And that can mean some problems for cories and plecos and those kind of fish that need food off the bottom of the tank. But it is so important that we keep this in our diet. And then the next one here is bug bites. These are something that is a Canadian company that I have found are very, very nutritional. They're essentially just pieces of bugs that have been chosen or selected. It's a recipe of both bugs and salmon and other kinds of foods that are going to give your fish a very, very steady and healthy diet. So as you can see by looking at me, it is the following day, and we had a bit of a camera failure yesterday, and I had to run out and get some new equipment and replace some parts. Unfortunately, that kind of put me behind a little bit on this video, but we're going to get right back into it here. What we were talking about was foods, the different kinds of foods that are available, the supplemental foods that are available for your fish, those foods that are going to be healthy for your fish and are going to give proper nutrition to them. What we were talking about when we ended yesterday was basically the different kinds and varieties of foods that are on the market. As you can see from all these different ones here, there's a ton of different foods out there that you can feed your fish that are going to give them the proper diet that they need to stay healthy, colorful, active, and extend their lives tremendously. Now, what I want to talk about next is what is essential for your fish. What do you have to feed them daily in order to keep them in good condition? Food isn't the only thing, obviously. Water conditions, water parameters, the amount of plants that you have in your tank. There's so many different things that go into the health of your fish, but I think the number one thing that we are doing to make our fish healthy is giving them proper diet so that what they're ingesting into their bodies is giving them nutritional value and helping to keep your fish in good condition. So we're going to talk a little bit about supplements here, and what I mean by supplements are things that you're not getting in just a standard flake food or a standard pellet and that sort of thing, and what we can do to supplement a lot of those foods by buying other things that cover a specific area. Now, for example, with cories, you're going to find that a lot of the food that they depend on obviously comes from that food filtering down from the top of your tank and getting to the bottom of the tank. And if that's not happening, then your cories are not going to get the amount of food that is necessary to sustain them. And what I do is feed my cories right along with my other fish. They do get a certain amount of food during a feeding during the day. I feed my fish twice a day. Some people go as much as 3 times a day on the feeding, but I do twice a day. And I do fast my fish once a week, and that is on Sundays. No particular reason for Sunday. It's not a religious thing or anything crazy like that. It's just basically that I have found that it's just a great day for me to relax, kick back before Monday starts, and I don't have to worry about the fish, and I do fast them. Now, why do I fast fish? The reason why is it's like anything else. Fish get so much food during the week, and their digestive tract needs to have a little bit of a respite, a little bit of time to sort of filter things through. The biggest problems that you get with fish a lot of times is constipation, and that can be a real problem with fish if you're not careful. One of the things that is going to prevent that is if you feed them foods that are full of omega-3s. I know that sounds kind of weird because fish themselves have omega-3s in their own body, and we ingest salmon and fish like that, and we get our omega-3s from that, also from shrimp. But fish very much need to have the same thing because it moves the food through their bodies and it stops and prevents them from having constipation. So make sure that all of the foods that you're using, such as bug bites, which is a fantastic food for covering this problem, does have omega-3s in here, and those omega-3s are going to be so essential for your fish to make sure that they're getting the proper amount of omega-3s that are going to help push food through their bodies so they don't get constipated and have problems. Fish have problems just like any other animal in this area if you're not careful. One of the other things I want to talk about is a variety of foods. There are so many companies out there. This one, for example, is Cobalt. I love this food for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's got tons of essential minerals and essential vitamins and things in there that are going to be so important to your fish. And I'll give you a little bit of a close-up on that so you can see exactly what kind of cobalt I'm talking about. And I'll also let you take a look at the food inside there so that you can see. It's a rather interesting, it's not a pellet per se, it's more of a chunky type kind of food that you can either break up with your fingers, or you can throw it in there the size that it is if your fish are big enough to ingest that. And this is a great food because what this food does is it does not stay at the top, but it goes slowly and gradually down into the tank, giving your fish an opportunity to sort of not have it go directly to the bottom. Like I said, this can be a problem for cories, this can be a problem for plecos, this can be a problem for autocinclids and those kinds of fish that are dependent on food that does go to the bottom, and algae and so forth. And I really think it's important, like I said, to have a different variety of foods because they have different things that they offer up. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about here is these algae wafers, and this is a great product right here. Most of you are probably familiar with it if you're have freshwater fish, or even if you have marine fish, because this is something that covers both. Now, these tabs that are in here, wafers actually, they're not tabs, they're wafers, are about the size of a dime. As you can see, they're about this big. And what I do with these is I break them up into pieces, small pieces, and in the evenings I drop them down into this little slot in the glass that's sitting on top of here, so that the cories and the autocinclids and the plecos are getting their share of a diet where the other fish are sleeping. Plecos, Precocimus, autocinclids, and also cories are constantly moving around in the tank, even in the evening time. So it's a great time to feed this to them. Other things that we want to talk about as far as getting proper supplements in here. Topfin makes a great product that is really just dried bloodworms, and the reason why I'm pointing this particular one out is I'm not a big fan of Topfin anything. They do make a couple of little tanks that are great, but their food is really not the best. But this particular one really is. When you get involved with Topfin's blood-dried foods, bloodworms and that kind of thing, you also find that many of the foods that they are doing that are freeze-dried are actually foods that you could get live and may not be available to you. So the good way to supplement that is by using something like this, which is a freeze-dried. They love it. They eat it up really well, and it gives them the same amount of nutrition. Now, of course, nothing replaces live food, but they do get a good amount of nutrition from this that's essential for keeping them colored up and to give them a proper diet. Now, one of the things I want to talk about with food that I think is important, and that is the kinds of foods that you're giving your fish. I want you to think about the diet that you yourself might have and the different varieties of food that we have, just simply because we need them to keep our bodies tuned up and in shape. Can't eat one thing particularly every single day, because if we did, our bodies eventually would not get what is necessary to sustain them, and we would have problems over time. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about before I end this video is to make sure that you understand that when I am talking about a variety of foods here, I'm not talking about a particular brand. I'm talking about what's in the food, what kind of amino acids, what kind of omega-3s, what kind of probiotics, what kind of minerals, all of those essential things that are going to keep your fish healthy. If you're finding that in a good food, it doesn't always have to do with price either. People think that I paid this amount of money for a food, it's expensive, it's going to cover all the things that are necessary to keep my fish healthy, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes even the cheapest foods can offer up the best diet for your fish. So look at the container that the food is coming in, and make sure that you're reading it and understanding that what is in that food is covering all the areas that you can possibly cover for your fish. Now, we're talking about fish here that are in smaller tanks here. We're not talking about huge fish that are in 200-300 gallon aquariums where you're feeding live bait fish and that kind of thing. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about what is essential for your everyday tetras, your angelfish, your cories, your rasboras, all of those kinds of fish that basically eat these kinds of foods. So I want you to make sure that when you're doing research on the diet for your fish, that you are making sure that you read about the kinds of fish that you have, what is essential for them to keep them healthy. And when you do that, go out and look for some foods that do cover that, and make sure that they're full of those kinds of things that are required to keep your fish healthy. Thanks a lot for listening to me the last couple of days here. I apologize for the camera failure yesterday, but that's just one of those things that happens. And we'll get back to regular filming here over the next couple of days. So hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and also leave comments. If you've got anything to add to this or anything that I may have left out, it's important for me to hear that from you. Leave that down below in the comment section. Also, hit that bell. It's up here someplace, one side or the other. And every time we have a new video that comes out, you're going to be able to get a notification that tells you that we've got a new video out, and I hope you'll do that. So hit that bell up at the top there, and just always know when I've got something new coming out, because we've got a lot of great things that are going to be coming up here in the near future. As I said a couple of videos ago, we've got a 50-gallon that we're going to be doing here that I think is going to be a lot of fun. It's an interesting shape because it's a custom-made 50-gallon by Waterbox, which is a great company that I really, really enjoy. And we also have a Fiji cube that's coming up here that's going to be a 100-gallon that we'll be doing over the next few weeks as well. So I look forward to talking to you. Thank you for listening to me today, for watching the video, for subscribing and sharing with your friends. I appreciate it. We'll talk again soon.